Guys, this is Art, and just want to remind everybody we'll be meeting again next week, and this time we're going to be taking on 3 new chapters, so there's a bit more reading. We're going to be focusing on Genesis 1, Yahweh is better, Genesis 2 to 4, Adam is Israel, and Genesis 4 to 5, Cain is a fool. I would encourage you to try and read these chapters in the Bible as well as the chapters in the book. Now there are some ideas here as we're reading this through ancient eyes that might be new to a lot of us, so I wanted to just throw out a couple of ideas maybe to help understand where some of these ideas come from and who is thinking about these ideas. So some of the frameworks to consider as you read this, one is called scientific or historical concordism. And that is basically the idea that science, history, and the Bible concord with one another. So the statements made in the Bible are scientifically and historically accurate. Here's an example where we see groups that look at the literal 6-day creation or 6,000-year-old earth by looking at the genealogies come about. You'll see groups like Answers in Genesis or the Institute for Creation Research take the concordism view. Another group is Hugh Ross's Reasons.org. Now, in their case, they're saying that everything is accurate, but they take an old earth approach. So they then look at some of those scriptures and point to how they refer to, say, the expansion of the universe and Big Bang cosmology. So they will take a scientific and historical concordist view of the scripture as well and come to another conclusion of an older earth. Another view is accommodation. Now, accommodation is the idea that the Bible accommodates our lack of understanding and uses phrases that we would most likely understand. In this view, the idea is that the Bible does not concord with science, but it's not because the Bible is wrong in any sense. It's that God understood that we wouldn't understand many of the ideas, so the terms and phrases used were to accommodate where we're at. And a great example of that accommodationists use is the incarnation. So for us to really understand God, it required Him to accommodate us by becoming a man in Jesus Christ. There's another view, and I don't really even know the name of it, but I really sense this as I read, especially where I think ends and bias are going. Maybe we can come up with a name on Wednesday. But it's the idea that the Bible does not speak to either historical or scientific events, but rather communicates theology within the cultural and literary traditions of the time. So when it talks about the days of creation, it's not really making any statement to accommodate our understanding or to make a historical statement. It's making a theological statement in the context of the literature and the culture of the times. Now, I think as a group, we've been sort of thinking that the scientific historical concordism might present some difficulties, but I think most of us are kind of leaning in an accommodation view, or maybe this third view. I guess I'll call it the literary view. So I was thinking about how does the literary approach maybe work in terms of how we read the Bible. So as an example, imagine the scriptures were written today and you received the first chapter of Genesis and it looked like this. You might have a friend say, well, this makes absolutely no sense. This does not in any way fit what we know about science or history in terms of the creation of the earth. Therefore, I'm going to reject the whole thing. Now, as a person who's studied poetry, you might say, well, as I look at this, I can count the syllables, and what I realize here, this is a haiku. So we've got a 5-syllable stanza, then a 7-syllable, and then a 5-syllable again. So I took some time to make a haiku that captures what the beginning of Genesis talked about. So in our modern view of things, we would never say, well, where do I find the scientific truth? It's very obvious that this is an example of a poetic form that is talking about the idea that God made everything that we have on earth. Now, for someone who doesn't understand poetry or haikus, they may have never even noticed the fact that this was written as a poem and might attempt to try to read it literally. So as we read ancient literature, we might look at Genesis 1, and what's interesting is the terms that we get in our English Bible is formless and empty, or formless and void. Well, that's tohu, bohu. Those rhyme in the original Hebrew. So all of a sudden we're now dealing with a rhyming pattern that we don't pick up. You also can see the symmetry with day 1 creating light and dark, but day 4, that space is now filled with the sun, moon, and stars that provide the light and dark. With day 2, we have waters above and waters below that are separated, and they create 2 spaces. Day 5, symmetrically, fill that space with the sea creatures and the birds. Day 3, again, water and land are separated, and now day 6, that's filled with the land animals and humans. So there's this symmetry that we may not pick up. And then finally, day 7 is the Sabbath rest. So all 3 of those pairs of days all converge onto day 7. So this might be a way in ancient Near Eastern culture they would have read this and easily identified this as a poetic structure. Another way we see this is in this term called a chiasm, which is a rhetorical literary device where parallel lines of text correspond in an X pattern. So you have A and B and C, and then you have a B primed and an A. That provides a symmetrical pattern. So here's an example of the story of Noah, and you can see it starts off with Noah and his sons in A, and then A prime, it ends with Noah and his sons. In B, God promises to flood and establish a covenant, but in B prime, God promises not to flood again, and he's going to remember his covenant. You move down to E, there's 7 days waiting for the flood, but E primed, there's 7 days of waiting for dry earth. And you move down to the center point, which is the most important part of the chiasm, which is God remembers Noah. So again, maybe within the ancient Near Eastern culture, they're reading this and they can pick out, just like we could pick out the haiku rather easily, I see where these guys are going with this. The most important part is God remembering Noah, and then there's this symmetrical pattern that pivots around that center point. So are these the correct ways of looking at it, or is it a combination of the 3? I'm not sure. I think that's what will be fun about talking about this next Wednesday. So just go into these chapters with those ideas in mind, and I think it might help to better understand where this is all heading. Look forward to seeing you guys soon. Bye.